the sight of a Pinaka doing its thing is it's really breathtaking. The Indian Army is all set, according to reports in the Times of India and elsewhere. The Indian Army is about to place an order for worth 10,000 crore rupees for thousands more of these rockets. The Pinaka sort of stands out as an Indian homegrown weapon project where very little has gone wrong. Everything has gone right. Under no situation or circumstance would the Pinaka be more expensive than an imported comparable capability from any country, whether it is Russia, Israel, US, no matter what. It would be more expensive, much more expensive to get it from abroad.
This is one of your biggest, if not the biggest, public-private partnership in India when it comes to defense equipment. How did it happen with Pinaka?
World-class leading companies like Tata and L&T build the rockets, and the Pinaka systems is not a problem at all. Full faith in that. And the fact that for the Pinaka is being built by both these companies, India's tallest, biggest private sector defense manufacturers, even more shows the kind of icing on the cake confidence that the army has in this system, which is because the army has basically said, there should be no stoppage in supply of this system because we want it. We love it so much. We need it so much. We will not tolerate any pause in supply. Therefore, if you need to, do companies ko de do manufacturing order, taki it comes on time to us. We do not want any hitches in the supply of this weapon system to us.
Hello and welcome. This is the 54th episode of Fina Defense, and we are recording just a few days before the Republic Day, when we'll see the grand Republic Day parade. And a topic of our discussion today is going to be one of the weapon systems that you will see at the parade, actually. And I think it's going to be a very interesting, fascinating episode because I think once again, Shiv, we are going to be discussing a rare sort of, accomplishment, good achievement when it comes to India's internal indigenous defense production development cycle. But how have you been? Are you looking forward to the Republic Day parade as well?
I'm looking forward to the parade. Out of my window this morning, I was greeted by the wonderful sound of the Jaguar formation, and I caught a small glimpse of it. So Republic Day is always a great time for defense enthusiasts. Obviously sad that we won't be seeing the Dhruv this time,
yes.
Because the fleet is grounded, but lots of things to see this time.
Yeah.
33 different aircraft, lots of things happening,
Yeah. In fact, our office is in Noida, for people who don't know, and most of these aircraft actually take off from the Hindon Air Base, which is quite nearby. So in the week leading up to Republic Day, you actually kind of hear a lot of, fighter jets and other sorts of planes and helicopters kind of taking off from there, and at times even flying over our office building, actually.
That's right.
Right. So this week we'll talk about the Pinaka missile system. The name Pinaka is a Sanskrit word derived from the god actually after whom you're named, the bow and arrow of Lord Shiva.
That's right.
And the Pinaka rocket system, I think the army is a fan, is what I kind of sense from what I read about its sort of induction and the comments that come out. So I want to talk to you about the system because it's a system that I've read about several times. In terms of some test was done successfully, some induction is taking place, some orders are being placed, etc. Exports also, by the way, happened to Armenia, which I'm going to come to later in this episode. But I really haven't read much about the system itself. What is it? When was it? When did we start developing it? What was the development cycle like? What sort of models do you have, so to speak, of this system? But before we get to that, actually, want to talk about the concept of rocket artillery in the first place. Because when you think artillery, you immediately picture a field gun, and most people actually picture the Bofors gun because they were made very, very popular during the Kargil War. When it comes to the spectrum of aerial weaponry, whether it's your field guns to at the top level you have your cruise and ballistic missiles. Let's leave up ballistic missiles aside, obviously. Your cruise missiles. Where does a rocket artillery system stand, and what sort of edge does it give you over a field gun?
So, I'm really glad that we're talking about the Pinaka today because like you rightly said, it's one of those fairly low-profile weapons. You don't hear about it very much. It's not flashed about too much. You do see it, quietly rumbling along the Kartavya Path on Republic Day, which will happen this year as well. But it is truly, an outlier of a weapon system where every part of it is Indian, made here in India. Development of it began a long time ago. But let's start by, first defining what the Pinaka is. The Pinaka is basically a multi-barrel rocket launcher system. Or an MBRL system, which is basically, for those who may not be familiar, think of it as a multiple rocket launching sort of mechanism hoisted on a truck that can move anywhere it wants to, incline those launchers and start firing away. It's a system that the army began inducting quite some time ago. There are four regiments of the Pinaka which are currently in service. This is, of course, open source information. And the army has orders pending for, I think, 6 or 7 more regiments, which demonstrates an enormous amount of confidence in this weapon system. And I will come to why this system has been such a success in just a short period of time, but your question over the differences between a multi-barrel rocket launch system and and a field gun, there are many apart from the kind of ammunition used, apart from the the error probability, the damage, the kind of the possibility of guidance, the range. The number of pieces of ammunition you can fire at a time. By its name you can tell what the Pinaka does. A multi-barrel rocket launcher system basically means it's able to fire multiple rockets in a very, very rapid sequence of time. I think dozens of rockets in a minute, if I'm not mistaken. And the sight of a Pinaka doing its thing is really. It's really breathtaking, and we'll try and maybe insert a video in this episode or put a link in. But it truly is a breathtaking weapon system, and basically, saturation damage against a target, being able to hit multiple targets over an area of your adversary is where this kind of thing comes in. An artillery gun is a sort of more pointed sort of attack, using an artillery shell. Which has shrapnel. There are various different kinds of ammunition which you can use in the Pinaka. There's high energy, high explosive rockets. There's area denial rockets. All these many different kinds of things. The other important aspect of the Pinaka is the fact that it can be constantly improved. Its range can be extended in many ways. There are smart characteristics like guidance that can be added to this weapon, which is actually precisely what is being done. And the reason why we're talking about the Pinaka today also, Dev, is because the Indian Army is all set, according to reports in the Times of India and elsewhere. The Indian Army is about to place an order for worth 10,000 crore rupees for thousands more of these rockets. They've already placed orders for the regiments. When I say regiments, I mean the vehicles, the guidance systems, the command posts, support vehicles, loaders, and things like that. But the existing regiments are hungry for the ammunition. They need more of the ammunition, and that's what that order is going to be placed for. And when you see an army like the Indian Army, which is which needs these systems more than any other, because you've got a live situation across your frontiers in the northern sector, to acquire these things in large numbers, fully built in India weapon system. It's been crafted here. It has been improved here. It has had all of its technologies upgraded right here in country. It's a very, very satisfying thing. Of course, we'll talk about the exports and potential exports a little later. But I think the Pinaka sort of stands out as an Indian homegrown weapon project where very little has gone wrong. Everything has gone right. It was inspired. I wouldn't even say it's inspired. The Indian Army used to use, and still I think uses in small numbers, the BM-21 Grad, which is a Soviet-era rocket launch system. And basically the Indian government decided that, we need to build our own. And I'm sure we can build better ones. The DRDO stepped up. There were a group of laboratories including, if I'm not mistaken, the ARDE, which stepped forward and said, we can do this. And this was way back in the 80s. The Pinaka system didn't happen very, very quickly. It took its time. There were some hurdles in terms of development because India had never developed anything like this before. But to the amazing credit, to the generations of teams that have worked on the Pinaka, the success is there for everyone to see. Thousands of crores in orders from its principal customer, the army. Export orders from at least one country, probably more, and I hear that export country wants to order more now. So it's an outlier in every sense. So it's a great weapon system.
Yeah. In fact, let's dive right in about the system itself and its development cycle and how it kind of took shape. Because the TOI report that you mentioned, the army is all set to place an order for rupees 10,800 crore worth of rockets for the 10 regiments that will be in service. 4 are in service and 6 are on order, like you said, 6 or 7 are on order. One of the quotes that struck me in that report actually was the Army Chief's quote, where he says that as soon as we get longer ranges, which is in development, we might drop plans for other alternate long-range weapons we are looking at and concentrate just on this system. That kind of tells you the confidence the army has. Once this is done, tested thoroughly, we are it. Bas aur kuch dekhna hi nahi hai. We are there for the long haul with this. We are going to be. It's basically this is going to be the backbone of the Indian Army's artillery regiment. Basically, tell us about this. The whole development cycle, how did this come into being? Like you said, the idea was first mooted in around 80s. And while kind of researching for it, I came across reports, but I could not really verify it, that it saw some use in the Kargil war as well, which actually primarily is dominated by the Bofors gun, obviously. But it did actually see some use during the Kargil war, but that was like, the sort of just inductance had to be used suddenly because you had a raging conflict going on. And when you were mentioning the laboratories, actually, it was quite interesting to note that a recent PIB release, this was for a new variant of the Pinaka system, which is a guided missile launch system that is being tested. It listed the kind of laboratories involved in this newer variant. So I just wanted to put it out there for our listeners and viewers before we get into the system itself. So you have it being designed and developed by the Armament Research and Development Establishment in association with the Research Center Imarat, Defense Research and Development Laboratory, High Energy Minerals Research Laboratory, and Proof and Experimental Establishment, with the support of Munitions India Limited and Economic Explosives Limited as production agencies, and the support from the private sector, Tata Advanced Systems Limited and Larsen & Toubro. So that's quite the number of agencies involved in this system. So let's dive into it. Tell us about when did we start thinking of developing such a missile system, a rocket system. How has that journey been? And like you have pointed out, why is a wrong way to ask it, but how did we manage not to do anything wrong with this?
So, the Army Chief's comment is actually one of the most heartening comments I've ever read. There's something so satisfying, for an Army Chief to say, that whenever the range of the Pinaka is extended, we actually think twice about ordering other systems, strike systems or missile systems or whatever, which presumably he means from abroad, which means that every little improvement in the Pinaka actually, triggers a kind of process in the army saying that, Arey Pinaka se ho raha hai ye. We're buying this missile from outside, spending so much money, but the Pinaka is doing the same thing, or the improved Pinaka, which is going to be online in 6 months, will do the same thing. It's going to be a longer range. It's going to have a guidance. It's going to have GPS. It's going to have a chip on it that can guide it during the that terminal phase of attack. So why do we need these missiles? So not only is it the quote from the Army Chief, and I want to highlight this, Dev, is that not only I interpret it as not only him saying that this is a weapon system we are satisfied with, but it also means it's saving taxpayer dollars by the crores, probably. Because the Pinaka system, no weapon is cheap. All weapons are expensive. But under no situation or circumstance would the Pinaka be more expensive than an imported comparable capability from any country, whether it is Russia, Israel, US, no matter what, it would be more expensive, much more expensive to get it from abroad. So for the Army Chief to go on the record and put his stamp of approval and endorsement for an Indian weapon system like this, saying that for a country that imports so many things, saying we think twice about imports when we have a better Pinaka. I think the makers of Pinaka would be very, very satisfied, and justifiably so. Point number 2, the reason why the Pinaka relationship with the army has been such a good one, I think, is because unlike many other projects, the Pinaka has had very deep army involvement from the start. That's point number 1. Point number 2, the army has shown faith in the Pinaka right from the start. It started inducting them as soon as it was able to demonstrate even a basic capability. Even though it did not meet all the requirements of the army placed orders and got a few regiments in, which is the right thing. And we've always said this on this show. The right thing to do is get it, put it in your system, and then start improving it, because that's how you build an ecosystem of homegrown weapons. So the Pinakas had a small role in the Kargil war, is what I've also heard in reports, and those who've reported on the war confirm this. That's not surprising. At that point of time, the Pinaka may not have actually been ready operationally, but it was an opportunity. Since you actually had a conflict situation, what better opportunity to test something that you're building than a real life opportunity? And I hear the Pinaka did just great then. Of course, the Bofors guns stole much of the limelight at that point of time, but the Pinakas obviously played something of a role. It tells you a great deal that many of your Pinaka units right now are all deployed in high altitude areas. That's another reason why it's such a unique weapon system, and why the army loves it and has so much faith in it, is because from the ground up, it has been designed to be extremely rugged and capable of being deployed in very, very difficult terrain, whether it is the desert or the plains or high altitudes, mostly the high altitude. This kind of a weapon system is something you need in a frontier border area, because it has these rockets have ranges anywhere from 45 to about 100 kilometers, maybe even more than that. And that's the kind of range from which you want to hit someone across a frontier or across the border. So that relationship with the Pinaka has been extremely good. The laboratories involved in the Pinaka, heartened by this confidence, when your customer shows confidence, it becomes a self-fulfilling kind of yin-yang situation. My customer wants it, they are buying it, they're putting their money where their mouth is, they're placing orders for it. Now I have the incentive to put some of my own money and improve it even further and offer them a better one, which is what the army chief is saying. Whenever the range increases, I think I don't have to order something from from abroad. So it's amazing. So it's almost like the Pinaka is competing against itself. Let's make it better. Let's make it better. Let's make it stronger. Let's make it smarter. Let it hit further. And that's been going on for all this while. So when the army finally has the confidence to place such enormous orders, 10,000 to 800 crores is not a joke. That kind of thing can buy a lot of stuff from abroad. That shows that the Pinaka and the army are like this right now. And the other reason why it is so satisfying, and this is very important to say, is because the army is justifiably and correctly criticized sometimes for being inimical to Indian weapons, imposing too many trials on Indian systems like the Arjun tank or the Nag or the indigenous Bofors type artillery system, the ATAGs. And insisting on all manner of criteria before it even accepts or inducts it. All of those are true, and those don't change. The army has been extremely, in some cases, possibly irrationally finicky when it comes to homegrown weapon systems. But for every one of those instances, there is the Pinaka, where the alignment between maker and customer, developer and customer, has been so unusually robust that it's almost flawless. It's actually almost unsettling. How could this relationship be so strong? These are the same laboratories that also have problems with the army, saying that you don't accept our stuff. You're constantly, you never insist on such tests for imported mal, but you always ask us to show these things which we cannot. So, it's actually amazing in that sense. And I think the maturity of a weapon system really emerges when you've got large numbers of that weapon being inducted by that primary customer, which is the army. 11 regiments is no joke. B, you've got an incredibly robust industrial complex building these systems. You've got Tata and L&T, nobody bigger than that in private sector defense in this country. You had the Ordnance Factory Board. You've got smaller MSMEs in defense building parts of these rockets, all coming together in a very brilliant and busy and warm, buzzing industrial factory ecosystem, churning out these systems, these trucks, these rockets, these launchers, the hydraulics, the nuts and bolts, all of it coming together in this very sort of satisfying supply chain that's just going into the army one by one, one by one, one by one. And I think that is the beauty of it. And the other wonderful aspect of the Pinaka is that since the laboratories, the army and the manufacturing agencies are all so in sync and they understand each other so well, and profits are obviously being made, from these weapons, the incentive to improve them, the incentive to have a Mark II,
Yep.
which has been tested for the last few years, to extend the range and to, I don't really like this word very much, but to delight the customer. The army has not asked us for a extended range weapon, but let's do it in the lab. Let's test it at DRDO and we'll offer it to the army. And so the army is like constantly pleasantly surprised. The army is like, oh my God, we didn't even ask for this and it's here. That's the tone of what I see from what the army chief has said. And I am not surprised at all because it gives India a great deal of strength, saying that we've mastered this weapon.
Yep.
This has given us a great deal of confidence in the international market as well. We can use it as a bargaining chip when we sign deals with others, which is apparently happening with the French right now.
Yes.
The French are evaluating the Pinaka not out of some kind of barter system, but this is literally much more cost effective than any comparable weapon system in any other part of the world, including what France itself built. So if we are competing with France, which is one of the world's foremost weapon manufacturers, then I say salute to the Pinaka.
Yeah, in fact, the France thing was quite a quote I came across because when it comes to India's exports, you could justifiably say that they are usually to smaller nations. But I think it was a French minister, if I'm not wrong, in November last year, who said that they are seriously evaluating the Pinaka system. Right. So, to help our listeners and viewers kind of understand the sort of edge the system really provides the Indian Army, we'll do what we, on occasion do, like sort of take a hypothetical. Let's take two scenarios. You have Pakistan and you've had a conflict, the Kargil war that happened, where Pinaka actually saw some action. But let's assume that takes place now when you have 4 full-fledged regiments of the Pinaka system with you, or maybe a few more. And then you have the China-LAC standoff where you have a potential of a conflict breaking out, even though there's this sort of agreement taking place and they're kind of going back, but the situation remains fragile. In case there's a conflict to happen with Pakistan, the kind that happened during the Kargil war, or if there's a actual fighting scenario happening with China, what sort of edge does Pinaka give you? How would it function in an actual physical conflict?
So, when we explain what the Pinaka can do, which is fire, furious barrages of rockets, high explosive rockets or other kinds of rockets out to distances of between 45 and 90 kilometers, you're basically drawing a circle around your target and your adversary, saying that your airfield or your weapons depot or your military base or your some kind of sensitive establishment or your radar site or your even your server base or your drone base are all within my target radius of my Pinakas. So you can do what you're doing, but you try anything funny, I can let loose. The one of the great things about a system like the Pinaka is it's a shoot and scoot kind of weapon, which means it's built on these heavy duty trucks, which are very, very capable trucks. They're all terrain trucks, which means they can travel at high speed up to high altitude, which means it's difficult to figure out where they actually are. A bunch of a Pinaka battery can fire for a few minutes at a target and then quickly scoot from there. These are big trucks, huge trucks, Tata trucks, and they can get away from there. So it's not always easy to retaliate fire at a Pinaka regiment or a unit, that easily. It's all these things can happen in an extreme scenario, but I'm just saying that's what the Pinaka is there for. When I said that the Pinaka rocket system can have different kinds of ammunition, it could have high explosives, which means, completely saturate and destroy targets within, a given radius, an airport or whatever it is. There could be area denial ammunition, like the kind that's being ordered right now. I think half the order is for area denial, which basically means not only do the rockets land and damage what they hit, but they also release these minelets or bomblets. So you're creating a kind of minefield and therefore denying access to your adversary's troops to enter that place. So maybe you don't want to damage that area completely, but you don't want your adversary to have access to that area. And therefore you create area denial. The Pinaka does that job amazingly well. And the fact that these are blindingly fast rockets that are being fired means that this is a lightning war. This is actually a kind of very, very rapid weapon system. It's not a slow-moving cruise missile. Even artillery shells take their time. These are rockets that move extremely fast and impact really, really fast. But even given that, the fact that the laboratories involved have been able to, build certain guidance capabilities, narrow down the error probability. It's called the CEP, the circular error probability of these systems. I understand that certain Israeli advice is being taken now as far as the correcting system, the trajectory correcting system is concerned. That's been on the table, which I don't see as a bad thing. That's like, taking some kind of expertise from another country in order to improve your own system is not such a big deal. But all other aspects of this system are completely Indian. So, and we don't even have to imagine how it would be used. The Pinakas are deployed in the northern sector. Obviously, we wouldn't know where exactly they're deployed, nor would anybody, wish to discuss it. But both in the northern sector as well as in the eastern sector, in Arunachal and elsewhere, there are Pinaka systems there, and they are doing their job. Obviously, the Chinese are aware of them. And what they're capable of. There's no reason to believe that they do not know that. Do the Chinese have a similar capability? I'm sure they do, but ultimately it is about mutual deterrence. And the Pinaka is a highly mobile system, which the Indian Army has in large numbers. 4 regiments doesn't sound like a lot, but 4 regiments is actually hundreds of Pinaka launching trucks along with their command posts, and you're going to get 6 more, which means you're building this enormous rocket artillery shield, which completely it's amazingly completely the opposite of what has happened with our field artillery. Our field artillery has gone nowhere. After Bofors, we've hardly managed to induct any field artillery. The ATAGS has just come online. There has been resistance to it from inside the army. Now it's finally happening. The M777s were, the only artillery pieces that actually entered service since Bofors for a very, very long time. You're in a ridiculous situation now, Dev, where private sector companies in India like the Kalyani Group, Bharat Forge, are building world-class artillery systems here, and they're exporting them to other countries before the Indian Army buys them. Which is, that's another episode altogether about the irony of the private sector, looking for exports when your own military doesn't buy your stuff. But the Pinaka, like I said, has belied all that. It's given India not only a credibility that it needs very, very desperately for all our investments in air power and all those things, ultimately having very, very strong artillery, that kind of, fiery teeth on the front line is where a system like this really sort of spreads its wings.
Yeah, right. We'll talk more on the private sector collaboration in this project and also the aspect of exports, but after a quick break.
Have you noticed a change in your health or your sleep or the way you deal with emotions or your cognition, anything of that sort?
Yeah, big change. So first thing that happened is within the first 6 months, I gained a lot of weight. All the weight that I had, that was pretty...
That's not a very motivating thing for someone right away.
It's not.
Yeah.
I mean, you start to resort to healthier mechanisms to cope with that weight gain, right? Then you start to run, you start to work out, you start to do all these things, because smoking tends to keep you thin. A lot of people, like, it suppresses your appetite.
The appetite, yes.
To which then you don't need to exercise that much in order to maintain. But that thinness is also kind of like a frail thinness. I've noticed my strength has gone up a lot more. My stamina, obviously, I can work longer hours. I can stay focused a lot better. I don't have to. My stress has gone down, ironically. So yeah, those things have really worked out well for me. I've also resorted to better habits in general. My sleeping cycle is now more regulated, and yeah, I think those things are really good.
Hello and welcome back. Shiv and I are discussing the Pinaka rocket system and how the Indian Army is very, very happy with it for very good reasons, like Shiv has explained before the break. And we've, in the first half, we've talked about the journey of the Pinaka system, so to speak, of how it kind of took shape from the whole development cycle and what's happening right now, where basically the Army is just like, kind of gung-ho and kind of ordering several rockets and is waiting for like more advanced versions of the system, one of which will be a guided variant, is what we understand. The recent test was, I think, a couple of months ago, which was quite successful for the guided variant. One of the aspects I wanted to focus on in this episode was the private sector collaboration, because I think this is one of your biggest, if not the biggest, public-private partnership in India when it comes to defense equipment. We've spent, I don't know, God knows how many episodes talking about how the private sector should have been involved decades ago, and it's just finally sort of happening with Tata kind of getting into it, L&T getting into it. You have Tata manufacturing the Airbuses in Vadodara and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How did it happen with Pinaka? Because Pinaka was developed in those very decades where we've complained that nothing happened, right? The thought came about in 80s. We've discussed before the break of how the first sort of, not regiments per se, but the first maybe systems kind of came into the army during or about the time the Kargil conflict happened, because there was some use in the conflict as well. So this is that very period, Shiv, where we, complain ki kuch nahi kiya. So how did this collaboration with Tata and L&T happen? And also an aside, I wanted you to explain to us, why do you have two vendors making the same weapon system? What sort of benefit do you get out of it? And do you not then run the risk of, maybe different sort of quality control, maybe differences in sort of service and maintenance provided by those two companies? Why do you have that? And, again, the big question, how did we manage to do this so right again?
I think the secret sauce that made the Pinaka successful, like I said in my first answer, was the kind of instinctive faith that the army showed in this weapon system very, very early on, and by putting its money where its mouth is and ordering the system. Nothing makes the blood flow like orders. Okay? If orders don't come, there is no cash flow, there is no industrial flow, there is no energy, there is no incentive, there is no there is no mind space to improve a system. Orders are the touchstone, the amrit, the trigger for everything that's good in a system, which is why all languishing weapon system projects will always say, orders to de do, hum improve kar denge. In this system, in this particular case, things actually happened in the reverse. The orders came and then the improvements actually started. Now, how exactly this happened or what was different about it, it may not have been, the whims and fancies of the army, or that the army was in a good mood for the Pinaka and not in a good mood for others. I doubt it was that. It was very likely that the need for such a system was much more strongly felt at that particular point of time, and therefore the army decided, since we can't get anything else apart from this Soviet stuff that we have, let's put some faith in this. It may have come down to a handful of officers who decided, let's show some faith in it, or the leadership at that time. Whatever the case is, those orders infused life at birth for this program. It meant that there was money at hand to improve it, to build it, to deliver it on time. There was incentive to ensure that the army is not pissed off. Very important thing. You don't piss your customer off. There was incentive to use money wisely in order to ensure no cost and time overruns. And we're talking about the DRDO and then the Ordnance Factory Board at this point of time. There was incentive to ensure that private sector partners were ready to build and to meet the demand of the army. Once the army had indicated that we like the system, we're going to order more, can you build it for us? Then you had the Ordnance Factory Board being corporatized. It was split up into many different entities. You've had L&T and Tata come forward and be assigned as production partners for these systems and for these regiments. Now, first of all, to answer your question about standardization, could things be different between Tata and L&T? These are world-class companies building the most sensitive military hardware for not just India, but the world. In fact, more for the world than for India, because so much is outsourced to them.
Yeah.
And when it comes to military manufacture, Dev, it's not ragtag stuff. This is very, very precision engineering, based on extremely precise computer-aided design documents. So it's not like people are building whatever they want. It's extremely precise, down to micrometers. So having world-class leading companies like Tata and L&T build the rockets and the Pinaka systems is not a problem at all. Full faith in that, and the fact that orders are flowing the way they are shows there has not been any QC quality control or any other issues with the rockets. The reason why two different companies have been given the orders is actually a pretty it's a fairly common practice in defense, which is it's basically to hedge risk, have more than one company being capable of supplying those rockets, so that in case one is unable to do so for whatever reason, there could be a strike, there could be some kind of industrial issue with that company, there could be other corporate priorities, whatever it is, you at least have another source of that. And the fact that that for the Pinaka is being built by both these companies, India's tallest, biggest private sector defense manufacturers, even more shows the kind of icing on the cake confidence that the army has in this system, which is because the army has basically said, there should be no stoppage in supply of this system because we want it. We love it so much. We need it so much. We will not tolerate any pause in supply. Therefore, if you need to, दो companies को दे दो manufacturing order ताकि it comes on time to us. We do not want any hitches in the supply of this weapon system to us. So that's the reason why probably two companies, and there are many others. Tata and L&T build the main systems. There are the solar industries. There are other smaller defense industries that are building all kinds of things: warheads, the high explosives, the fins, actuators, different things that are part the hydraulic systems. Some of the command post systems, they're all built by different companies, and they all finally come together at these two large giants. So it's an incredible public-private partnership example that has put India literally on the international map.
Yes, it has, definitely has, and that's going to be the last things we discuss is that export potential. We're already exporting it to Armenia. I'm going to come to Armenia specifically in a bit. I want to discuss something else on the topic, but before we do that. The export potential. At what point did India sort of realize, or was like, okay, you know what? Our army satisfied. We have that potential between L&T and Tata and other companies to be able to supply them with all the launcher systems and all the future rocket systems. Rockets that they order. Now let's kind of open up the system to other countries. So what I'm kind of basically trying to ask is kind of also sort of a follow up from a previous episode on exporting defense equipment. Is at what point does the government of India or whoever it is decide that okay, this weapon system, good to go, let's start or open it up for exports. You have the Akash missile system that also is open for exports. So when do you decide as a government or as the Ministry of Defense or maybe whoever that, okay, let's open this particular system up for exports. For both the world.
So many of these things were discussed in our previous episode about what was wrong with India's policies as far as defense exports are concerned. But it's a very, very fair question that you've asked, because not everything is up for export, obviously. You choose certain things. The criteria obviously are going to be things that have export potential. To export a weapon system into the global market, it has to be comparable and competitive with other weapons that will be offered to that same country. So Armenia must have been offered other similar kinds of systems as well, and they took a decision based on various factors, political factors, quality of the system, which the Pinaka didn't, is better than most systems compared to it, a good relationship with India. India is not very far from Armenia. All of those factors, like we've said so many times on this podcast, that no defense deal is just about the hardware. It's also a political decision and a political relationship. So the choice is made based on the efficacy of the equipment. The choice is made on whether it has a chance of actually winning those export orders, because remember, export campaigns are also expensive and they are paid for by taxpayer money. Thirdly, whether a sale of that particular weapon system to that particular country is of diplomatic and strategic benefit to India in some sense. All of these factors go into it. There are also other considerations. Will it interrupt the supply to the primary customer here in India? Will there be any such disruptions, or can we afford it? The army is obviously taken on board. And remember, for the army, like we discussed with the BrahMos in the earlier episode, having more customers of a weapon system is actually beneficial to the army, because it has the potential to reduce costs. It increases the possibility of a greater amount of infrastructure to support such systems. I'm not saying the Indian Army needs Armenia, but I'm saying potentially if there are more customers of these weapons, the overall cost of the acquisition of such systems could actually come down. There could be possible military exercises and drills with those countries that operate the same things. There are all these linkages that you can think of. So the army would also be on board for such things, and that's when it's decided. And incidentally, Armenia has also purchased the Akash weapon system. So the Akash is also, in many ways, the Akash has had a less happy journey compared to the Pinaka. The Akash, of course, is a surface-to-air missile, an anti-aircraft missile. But Akash has had its troubles, and the Akash has had quite a bit of resistance from the Indian forces, both the army and the air force. But the Akash also has taken its time, but come online and now is accepted in a big way by the Indian forces. There are many import orders and import contests and programs which were actually scrapped because the Akash had finally started meeting its capability requirements and things like that.
Right. Right. So final thought on coming to Armenia now. When we discussed in the last episode that, almost every defense deal is more of a geopolitical decision than, really something about defense. So similarly, I think we now are going to move away from the world of defense and talk more about the geopolitics of it, because what I want to understand is what stake does India actually have in and around Armenia. The reason I ask that is because, most people won't be able to place Armenia on a map. I'm not trying to be a know-it-all, even I can't. Very honest. Show me a map of the world, I don't know where Armenia is. I know the general reason. Most people don't know that Armenia has a raging conflict going on with Azerbaijan, a very violent one, an ethnic conflict that has gone on for several years, seen lots of bloodshed, etc., etc. They fight, and then there's sort of some ceasefire, and the cycle repeats again. I think the last ceasefire happened just last year, if I'm not wrong. So India signed a deal with Armenia, or rather Armenia signed a deal with India to buy 4 batteries of the Pinaka missile system in 2022, if I'm not wrong.
That's right.
The deliveries began last year. Like we discussed last time, what made India say, okay, what, we want to play a role in that region, so we're going to do this, obviously. So what's that reason? What are we trying to benefit? What are we trying to gain? What sort of world standing are we trying to achieve by ensuring a presence of our systems in Armenia?
So look, no weapon export is a small thing. It's always a big thing. It's always a very important decision. In the case of Armenia, I know for a fact that it wasn't India that was pitching its weapon systems to Armenia. It was Armenia that had approached India.
Right.
for these weapons. It said we're in the market for these things, and we'd like, would you sell us some weapons, because we've got, we've obviously got things on our hands right now with Azerbaijan. Now, India took a diplomatic and a difficult and a sensitive diplomatic decision, because, as you rightly said, the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict is a very violent one. There's an ethnic and sovereignty aspect of it over territory, and its location in the world also means that the sphere of influence of Russia and other countries impinges very heavily on it. I imagine that there would have been a Russian aspect to this as well. I'm not saying that Russia may have egged India on, but maybe Russia had a part to play in signing off on something like this. India doesn't need a Russian sign off, but you know what I mean. I mean, when you've got all these strategic players in that region, and India is not a direct player in that region like Russia is, India may have leveraged its friendship with Russia in order to at least understand what such a strategic move would mean. But overall, apart from that, if we zoom out just a little bit, it finally is an export order. And India would have weighed the pros and cons of taking a side in the conflict. It must be said that India has old and very deep diplomatic ties with Armenia. I didn't know about this as well, but I read about it, like very close relations with Armenia as opposed to Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan is relatively a more dictatorial sort of country, so there are differences between the two countries in that sense as well, and therefore it took a call on this aspect. But it is a sensitive issue, because ultimately all conflicts have masses of countries divided on sovereignty lines across the front line, and in this case as well, I'm sure India is part of a kind of pack that seems to be arming one side and not the other. But I think that's a reflection of India's rising stature. And we touched upon this in our last episode on the BrahMos, which is, taking difficult decisions, exporting sensitive material, sort of frontline weaponry to countries that have a difficult situation on their hands, completely accepting that there will be, a backsplash diplomatically or strategically on India. If you're selling the BrahMos to Indonesia and Philippines, there is only one country against whom, like I said, those weapons can credibly be used for. Similarly with Armenia, the Pinaka system that we're talking about on this episode is also being looked at by France. It's being looked at by also Indonesia. It's also being looked at by Nigeria, I hear, and some other countries in South America. So all of these, what that country is going to use it for, who they're going to use it against, are most certainly considerations as far as India is concerned. But India has an extremely mature, very, very experienced foreign office and diplomatic machinery, multi-layered between the MEA, the MOD, the Prime Minister's office. They work in tandem for these things. So these are not simple decisions. It's not like, oh, acha, Armenia ko chahiye, chalo de do. It's never like that. Many hundreds of things are taken into consideration. Trade objectives. What do we get out of it? Does this offer us access into that area? For our materials. We could go on for hours to talk about the complexity of what a defense export really means. But yeah, it takes a long time to decide on these things.
Yeah. Right. Great. Then I think fantastic episode, short and sweet, like the missile system we're talking about, short in terms of its size when it compared to the larger missiles that we have, and sweet, the journey of the Pinaka system. I think it's good we talked about it because, like you said, it's very, like even in the Republic Day parade, I mean, it's very unassuming. And it's, like, there's a truck.
Well, they can't have it firing.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. I've seen those videos, and when it fires, oh my God, that's just quite the sight to see. Just one small nugget before we leave. So I was going through the DRDO website, equally terrible by the way, just like HAL's, not good to look at. But anyway, they have a section on weapons, not weapons per se, but things that they have for exports, available for exports. Now, most made sense. There were some oddball items like sunscreen, and that also made sense. Because okay, you have soldiers, out there, so they might need sunscreen. But the DRDO apparently also makes chili spray. I was wondering why. Like, why would your forces need chili spray? And I thought maybe it's because of China, because you tend to end up getting into street fights with China instead of an actual gun battle. So why is that?
The chili spray or the pepper spray, which is basically like mace, in my opinion, that's actually a slightly more understandable item that the DRDO has built. The DRDO at one time used to make layberry juice and mosquito repellent and sunscreen and moisturizing lotion and lemon water and stuff like this. I wouldn't want to abuse somebody's work. It's ultimately all work is good work, and there were sensible people doing these things. But the only question is, why the hell is DRDO doing this? The DRDO is supposed to be making cutting edge weapon systems for the for the armed forces. Surely there are better agencies to do mosquito repellent and coconut water and rubbish like that. So when you talk about the chili spray, I remember reading about it a long time ago, and they've done it for a long time. I don't know if they still do it. Maybe it's still on their website. But it was probably used as a kind of riot control material for internal security purposes. Not for date night and things like that, but a kind of for the CISF or the CRPF, for people in urban chaotic situations using mace or chili spray to subdue crowds or things like that. I think that's what the intention was. But yeah, I completely agree with you. If you actually look at their website from many years ago, you would have seen far less acceptable products over there. So yeah, I don't think it's. I hope it has changed because the reforms that DRDO has undergone has meant that many of these sort of peripheral things, which are best left to the private sector, are gone from their inventory. But I'm surprised you say that chili spray is still there. So who knows?
Unless no one's updated the website. I mean, that's also
or that, which is very, very possible. Trust me, knowing DRDO, it's quite possibly a 2005 website that you're looking at.
Yeah, and I'm guessing like some cans definitely must have made it to the LAC after the recent brawls that you had with China. So just in case you need
possible. Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a good point. Since you can't use lethal weapons, you need clubs and chili spray and stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah, quite the sight. Two nuclear nations fighting with chili spray and
spraying
clubs.
each other in the face. Amazing.
Right then. Thanks, Shiv. Fantastic episode. Loved chatting to you about this Pinaka rocket system. I think it was one of our best ones, I think, for me at least, because I really enjoyed hearing the tales that you had to say. So thanks once again. And thanks as always to our viewers and listeners. And keep commenting. We love the comments that you give us, and they also give us a lot of ideas to discuss on our future episodes. That's it for this week's Defense Dose. For more, tune in next week. Till then, stay safe and do not cross any boundaries with a passport. Bye-bye.